Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, wheat yields are coming in over 100 bushels per acre. Hear how the industry has changed over time to grow higher wheat yields. Joe covers the benefits of our starting line seed treatment for protection on your double crop acres. Are your fields ready for fungicide application? Ben and Lynn talk about the importance of timing and adding insecticide.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben and Lynn, and we'd like to give you an update of what we're seeing going on this week. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, before we were starting to film, we were talking about wheat yields and how impressive things have been this past year. So we are finally getting some of the northern stuff to come in. We had this July 4th rain time frame where obviously we picked up some much needed rain, but it's put the wheat at a little bit of a delay for our northern production, per se. So would you agree, Lynn, that 100 is the new 70 for this year?
I believe so, yeah. That is, and I think in general, if we go back to even 3 years now, that similar mindset with wheat as we have with soybeans, 40, 50 used to be kind of the benchmark, and now I would say 70, we're getting guys that are probably a little bit on the disgruntled end, that the 80 to 90 to 100 is kind of where we're setting our goals for our field averages.
Right.
And I think it boils down to the level of management. It's changed. We're now using fungicides to control the disease, watching our populations, getting our populations, 1 head per square foot is a bushel, and trying to get those 100 heads per square feet or per square foot. And but in general, management. And then we have varieties now. Well, Ben, you've got varieties that have genes for scab tolerance.
Yep.
In other words, they basically, when the scab starts infect the spikelet, it stops arrests the disease. So just so many improvements that we have today, and it's changed things. And now farmers with the ultra earlies are thinking, I can make this work for a double crop, and we got better planters, we got just better everything, and I think that's all changing.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree. And we have the Julie and the Maddie have been posting some unbelievable test weights. We've been getting pictures of 64, 64 and a half, 65 pound test weights. We have all of our data in that we will share here shortly of our replicated research trials that are done by Tech Service Inc. And to have an average, like a 15 or 20 site year location average, being 63 and a half pound test weight on the Julie, it's just unbelievable. It's incredible, and you don't have to have quite as many heads. You can pack all that weight in a lot tighter when you're working with that style of variety. And both of those varieties have that FHB1 gene that you were talking about. So when you're looking in the seed guide and you want to see if you have that gene to help yourself from head scab, it's definitely something to be looking at as well.
So a lot of step changes in wheat. We're pretty excited about growers. Let's just talk about what the yield monitor. How high are these yield monitors hitting on these really good fields? And what's that's showing the potential of the wheat. What are we seeing, Ben?
I have seen sitting in my own combine as high as 145, 150. I have customers from the south where they would get 145, 150 on the monitor, and it would just hold. So there are spots in the field that are averaging. If you took your best 15 acres or your best 20 acres, there's spots in those fields that are averaging 140, 150, potentially even a little bit higher than that.
And then that comes back to that field averaging over 100 bushels an acre then.
Correct.
Because you have to have those really, really high yields. So, it's always been said that, if you want to average 100 bushel wheat, you say, well, this is how much fertility I need, this is how much nutrients I need. Well, you're going to have spots yield 150.
Right.
If you're going to average 100, because you're going to have some spots that are going to yield 50 to 75. It always happens that way. So that's why when managing your fertility and everything you do, just fertilizing for 100 may not be enough.
Right. And you got to fertilize for that higher amount, but what happens with wheat when we over-fertilize?
You can have problem with standability.
Correct. So we have guys that for the first time in 15, 20 years, they raised wheat. They had a little bit of standability issues. Palisade is that growth regulator, and that product is going to get used on more and more acres, especially if the price of wheat stays about where it's at now, and it's very profitable for the marginal acre, we're going to see more palisade used next year. We're going to see higher rates of nitrogen and sulfur used next year to really push those guys. 100 bushel, yeah, that's awesome for your field average. What else can I do here? Because there's more potential beyond that, is what we were just discussing there. So
that's all good.
It's great news. And even the stuff that had a little bit of rain on it, the test weights aren't horrible. There's a little bit of dockage going on, but so far I haven't heard of any Dawn or mycotoxin, alpha toxin discussions at the elevators. So everything's holding together. It's going to be our last big push here, and I think we'll get wheat wrapped up. And almost everybody has moisture in the ground to get some double crop beans stuck in.
That's great.
So we kind of talked about last week on double crop beans and planting populations. We are now past the 4th of July. Next couple days here, I'm definitely in that narrow rows, 200,000 plants per acre is where I'm pushing those guys to start planting that. So one of the other things that I did earlier on this week, had some customer calling asking about potential herbicide carryover, atrazine carryover in soybeans. Went out and looked at the field, and we got a little bit of Phytophthora showing up. Not very big, probably about the size. If you put the 3 or 4 spots in, it'd fit in the size of this small cup of joe room. But where that surface water ran across the top of those fields, we've seen that before. It seems like it'll take out just where that surface water runs, and we have a little bit of Phytophthora damage going on, and I got pictures we can post on that. But it's very isolated. It's only where the water runs across the top of the surface, and if you have an issue like that specific issue, Kennedys have really good field tolerances, but they don't have any specific genes for the specific races. I'd be looking at planting a product like Monroe, which has a 1K, or an Austin that has a 3A. So when you're looking at the charts and you're not happy if you see a little bit of dead plants and where the surface water runs, I would be looking at either a product that has a 1K or the 3A gene.
And 3A being the most powerful.
Correct. So I think like 65 or 75% of the products on the market, when you look at Iowa States, and don't quote me on this, you have to go back and look up yourself, but have the 1K gene. So that's the most popular gene, but there's a little bit of resistance to that gene as well right now. So we have like 3 or 4% of the varieties in Iowa State's trials have the 3A. So we'll slowly transition more and more products, and I can see that in our MS Tech testing. There's more and more products that are coming down the line with this 3A.
Yeah, and the thing is to keep in mind that Phytophthora is and correct me, Ben, if I don't describe it quite right. I'm using layman terms, but the fungi literally has to swim to the root and to infect it. So you have to have a lot of water. You've got to have saturated soils, and that's why on our seed treatment, we put a really strong dose of products for Phytophthora to give you some time for either the tolerance to develop or the plant to get through that stress, which is typically right after planting. That's where a lot of Phytophthora can infect, is right at planting time or shortly after planting.
Correct. Yep. And so these plants here, they would be in that stage where the plant has already taken over. They've been planted for 2 months now. So it's just something to keep an eye out on for. It's never very many acres from what we've seen. But if this is something that's showing up on your farm, or if it's showing up on my farm, I'm making sure that individual field has a 1K or a 3A gene to manage some of that stuff.
Tighter soils, water ponding, anything like that.
Yep.
That's going to favor Phytophthora.
Yep. Lynn, you and I have been out in a couple cornfields. What are we seeing for insects?
Yeah, we're jet beetles. Talked about the last time I was on. Definitely seeing some minor clipping on that. Nothing looks like it's going to be too heinous, but we are basically at the fungicide application time. So as you're going out and looking for bugs again, make sure that you're including an insecticide if you're going to do a fungicide application, because we are seeing some damage out there, and it doesn't take much for those Japanese beetles to soak those clips and cause some pretty big issues. So if you're making the pass, right now on our acres, we're going to include the insecticide, because there's enough out there that we're justifying the cost of adding that since we're making the pass. So the bean side of it, I mean, doesn't seem like they're as bad on the bean side. The corn, definitely the silks are of what is concern to me right now when I'm looking at the bugs.
They're actually not after the silks, or after the pollen on the silks. Is that fair to say, or are they actually after the silks?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that, but it seems like they do a fair job of clipping. I got a picture here that we'll post, but when I was walking one of our customers' fields, it was 1 out of every 200-300 plants. Like, you wouldn't see any damage, you wouldn't see any Japanese beetles at all, but then there'd be like 7, 8, 9, 10 of them that were keeping the silks trimmed off clean. So you are correct. That's probably not the threshold that Iowa State would recommend, but if you're getting the free pass rather than when you're doing that $14, $13, $12 aerial application cost, you may as well get an effective insecticide. And you don't have to have a super expensive insecticide to knock both Japanese beetles and corn rootworm beetles out when you're doing it. So,
and as we're looking at that too, I mean, when you're talking about Phytophthora too, I think it brings back to the next point that right now it kind of seems like guys get into the mindset of, I can stop scouting. Like, we can never stop scouting. We got to continue to look for these issues. So even if you go in and do the application, say now, we need to get back in there once we've sprayed that and the interval is obviously passed. Don't be walking in right afterwards. But to continue to look at that, because beetles will move. They'll move around. They can exit and then come back. And then, we've seen probably the last 5 years where we'll get a late flush of Japanese beetles and they'll start causing havoc on our soybean plants right at the end of the season. And at that point, then you have to justify, are you doing a revenge kill or are you actually doing the economic threshold? But like I said, right now, we're at a point where we're going to make the pass anyways. It just seems to be the prudent measure to take advantage of that pass and make sure that we're taking care of that problem before it gets too far away from us.
I got a question. We had a lot of wind in a lot of areas. Go across. All this corn getting all twisted up and pushed down and everything. Is it injured in any way that a fungicide that it's really, really, really critical to have a fungicide on this year because we've damaged the plant to the fact that to make it more susceptible for disease to enter into that plant? I mean, is there any theory on that, or am I just thinking crazy here?
Well, for hail in specific, they want you to wait 7 to 10 days because that corn plant is going through enough stress during that time frame, realizing what happened to it. They want you to lay that fungicide down 7 to 10 days. Iowa State recommends that. Some of the independents that I have talked to recommend at least a 7-day period to go back and actually get some fungicide on some fresh leaves as well, because you're going to be relying more on the leaves above the hail damage as well to be pulling in more sunlight for that. But yeah, a fungicide application, as long as the crop looks like it's going to make APH or above APH, I'm still spending money on the crop. But if you have a situation where you're like 30% defoliated pre-tassel, I mean, there's some things there that we got to start putting a pencil to things and looking at the wind and hail charts from the USDA. Has some really nice wind and hail charts. You want to be looking at those and trying to figure out whether you're going to pencil that APH for that field.
And it's back to scouting too, though. I mean, go look at it. If the potential is still there, don't give up on it. I mean, we've seen the stuff come back and have really good potential. And I think to Joe's point a little bit too is when we look at some of the stuff, the crop has been stressed. And when we have stress, that could be a vector for other diseases to make an entrance. So if you still feel like you're in the game, fungicide applications are definitely a worthwhile opportunity, even if you think your crop has had a little bit of stress.
Right. Nope, I completely agree. And from that same standpoint, making, whether you have wind, hail, or not at this point, gray leaf spot is definitely starting to show up on the bottom leaves. I found spots as high as the ear leaf, the tar spot that we talked about last week. Because of rain and some other things going on, the application hadn't been made. I can see that the spots are progressing. We have some spots that aren't quite to the ear leaf yet, but are going to be close. So whether it's a Haggy or an airplane or a helicopter or a drone, these applications need to be made, and we need to make sure we have good coverage to protect the potential that's there.
So we're going to see another flush of weeds now? I mean, with the rain in these soybeans?
I want to say no, but my heart.
Well, we do have canopy now.
We have canopy, and that's probably something that, looking back the last couple of years around here, we've been a little bit dry, just like we have into this, and we've held that dryness a little bit further into July. And then what we have is the perfect storm of the canopy the beans are starting to kind of pull back a little bit as we're getting closer to senescence, and then that flush starts to kind of pop its way out. I've walked in some fields. I think we look good. There's a couple different theories out there. There's some guys that didn't put any residual in with their post because we had no rain to it. There were some guys that were a little bit later and then didn't get rain, and nobody's putting a definitive marker to it yet, but some of those residuals basically laid on the soil surface finally got activated back when we first started getting rain. So we got a little bit of I don't want to say a extra residual activity out of it, but maybe our residual carried a little bit farther because on the front end it wasn't doing anything, carried on the back end. So right now, the biggest areas that I'm seeing weed issues is where, you got a corn and a bean field coming up together and you didn't want to overlap. There's some stuff kind of laying in the shade there. Test plots are kind of one of those that are notorious for that. But actually in the crop, even the 30-inch rows, we've finally starting to see some good branching and bushiness out of them that, as of right now, I feel comfortable, but it always seems like August is where we start to see that last flush kind of stick its head out. So,
yeah, a lot of the April planted 30-inch beans are well into canopy, and I'm really not concerned about any of
Yeah,
those.
and we're at the end of spraying time too, as far as timing.
Yeah, options are extremely limited.
correct.
R2.
I mean, we're
R1, R2.
R2, basically everything that we've looked at in the last week now, wouldn't you say? I mean, even going and looking at the later maturity stuff that's in the plots, we're definitely getting very, very close to that R2, maybe even to R3 on some of the stuff that's out there. So I know we're talking to guys on corn fungicide, but this is another one that don't let your beans, don't be super focused right now on making sure that your corn is where it needs to be. I mean, corn's pretty easy to see with the tassel. Make sure you're going out and checking those beans because we don't want to miss that opportunity to get that fungicide application. I think right now something that I'm worried about is that we've finally got rain. Septoria could be setting in, and we're going to have a really, really nice opportunity to get rid of that with a fungicide application, so that way we're protecting those bottom 2-3 nodes and basically maintaining the full potential of the plant, which is something that we've not had an opportunity locally. Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, as long as I can say that I've been paying attention. We've always seemed like we've had Septoria set in on the bottom and take 1 or 2 nodes every year. So,
Correct. No, we're setting up really nice on the bean side, and I would say that I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to say that 80% of the soybeans that I've looked at the past week are at R3 and they're ready to go.
So that's fungicide time in R3.
Yep, and R3 is anytime you have 3/16 of an inch of a pod at the top 4 nodes, and 3/16 of an inch. I encourage everybody to go out and grab a tape measure and pull one of those little itty bitty pods off the top, and 3/16 of an inch isn't very big.
No.
So it's go time. There's a lot
Yeah.
to be done, and some rain showers that we're going to be dodging and missing and going around, but there's a lot going on right now. Last picture that I had here on this was some of corn planted the day or two after Easter on our MX 514. It's a very early flowering Stein hybrid. It's a shorter plant style. They originally called it 108, and I'm not sure where, I have to go back and look at the book, but they either call it 106 or 108 day or give it a range. But it looks like it's as far along as some of the sweet corn we planted. So we have already made it like 90% of the way through pollination. When you carefully go back and peel the husks off the side, if you take the corn plant, everything, all of those individual silks will fall off of each individual kernel if it's been pollinated. So it's a good time now to go see how you're making it through pollination. I don't think we're going to have any issues with pollination. We have really nice cool weather here coming in. The cool weather and the moisture is going to set us up for disease, but it's going to be really, really nice for getting every kernel pollinated, and hopefully we have enough moisture in the tank to keep the ones on the very tip filled out. And I think we're sitting up for a pretty decent crop for the guys that got rain.
Yeah, the stress came early, and that on soybeans, is a non-issue for the most part. Corn maybe a little bit, as far as setting up kernels and depth, but if we're going to have stress, we had to have stress. That's when I'd want it, I think.
Correct.
and I think locally here, these guys should be really thankful because we caught that stress after that V6 time frame. So we got we have some corn out there that has some nice potential from a rows around standpoint because it didn't catch that stress and was able to get all the goodies it needed to go. So, I mean, you were talking on some of that corn. It's not uncommon to find 18, 20 around, which is something that's very characteristic of that corn variety to begin with, or hybrid to begin with. So, but we didn't hurt ourselves in that department, and with the plant populations we have there, maybe if we don't get the extreme growth and length like we're accustomed to on some other, having the rows around and having the weight, we're going to be set up for a really, really great crop in that regard.
Completely agree.
This is a good example too of why you diversify your hybrid portfolio as far as maturity goes as well, because this stuff has caught everything just exactly right. Would 115-day planted at that same time be in this same boat? Jury's still out on that, but I think it's going to be a really great year for our early planted, early varieties, or early hybrids as well.
Couldn't agree more. So,
anything else?
Yeah, I think just get boots on the ground. I know it's absolutely miserable to be walking out in crops that's over your head and it's hotter than Hades, but it's very important to not give up on the crop. And I think that's as an industry, a lot of other companies and other independent reps have been preaching to get out there and be looking at your corn in the reproductive stage, because there's still a lot of time left and a lot of opportunity to manage that corn into high yield.
Yep.
Good. Well, I got 3 jokes, and we'll see if I can get a smile out of you guys today. You guys are tough, Anyhow, the first one, I don't know if you get out and about, but if you ever get to the West Coast and everything, you try to find a plastic straw, everything's paper, they're trying to outlaw plastic straw. So this one here I thought would tie in with that. The plastic straw ban, now enforced in many cities, was predicted by the 16th century prophet. His name was Nostradamus. Okay. All right, there you go. Now, again, the other thing, we all like our bottled water, right? Mm-hmm. A bottle of water was arrested because it was wanted in 3 different states. Do you know that? Solid, liquid, and gas. And then this one here. This one here is for Alex. He takes a lot of our photographs in our marketing department. What happens when you take a low-resolution photo of wheat fields? What happens when you take a low-resolution photo of wheat fields? They come out pretty grainy. Well, it's not a corny joke, it's a weedy joke, Anyhow, thanks for watching this week. We hope that your family is healthy and safe. We hope you're getting rain and not too much wind, and we'll see you next week.